I spent the last 2 weeks testing every glucose and insulin hack I could find on the internet, and I'm about to rank them from like minimal but still noticeable impact to the ones that shocked me with how big of an impact they made. These hacks have helped me lose over 14 kilos, balance my insulin, and get my chronic pain under control. But until the last 2 weeks, I hadn't chucked a glucose monitor on my arm to see the real impact of my blood sugar. But why do these hacks even matter? Did you know that controlling your insulin matters more than calorie counting? Because without insulin rising, it's impossible for the body to store fat. And how do we manage insulin? We manage glucose. How do we manage glucose? We monitor the impact that foods have on our bodies. And we can add some glucose hacks in that actually work to get the job done. A low insulin diet is the key to fat loss without counting a single calorie, and these hacks can help you include some extra carbs with a little less of an impact on the body. And knowledge is king. So here's what we're doing today. I'm going to be ranking these glucose hacks from E tier all the way up to S tier. This is going to be the stuff that barely really kind of moves the needle or has an impact, or is just really unsustainable in the average life, up to S tier, which are the non-negotiables that have the biggest impact. We're going to go from the bottom to the top. So the best stuff comes last. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around to see what shows up in the S tier. The things in the S tier are probably things that you wouldn't think. Hint, it's not a magic pill. And I'm also considering how easy these tips are to include in your life, because some of these tips take a lot more planning than others. And if you're like me and lead a busy life, that's not always really practical. Before we dive in, if you're looking for some weight loss help that actually works, when all other diets have failed you, I have linked to my fat loss resources in the description below. I've got a free masterclass, shopping list, and simple plans to help you get started. So, all right, enough self-promotion. Let's get into the video. Okay, E tier. This is the thanks I hate it, or the thanks but I'll just leave it for now. Starting off, we're going to have cold showers. So I know that cold showers have got other benefits: inflammation, immune system, turning white fat into brown fat. But for glucose control specifically, just minimal impact. Unfortunately, I tried this multiple times. I'd eat a meal, check my glucose, be standing in a freezing cold shower, check again, the spike. It was maybe a tiny bit dulled, but not really anything to make much of a difference. Or it could just be my body doing its thing naturally. Outside of that, not really a big impact. But a big drawback to this one is, how are you going to do this at work or after dinner with friends? You can't just take a break from your day to jump in the shower unless you're working from home, and that's really impractical. So unfortunately, I'm chucking this in the S tier, and it's a bit miserable. You're just like standing shivering in a shower. So unless you're into cold showers for the other reasons that I mentioned, this is probably not the one that you're looking for. So moving on. Now, what I'm going to chuck in D tier is Genema sylvester and bitter melon. So God, I hope I can spell these. So people talk about these a lot on TikTok. They talk about how they're amazing, that they dull blood sugar and all that. Yeah, they absolutely do something, right? And it only really works if you take these like before your meals or like with a meal. The impact is not as dramatic as the things in the top tiers that I'm going to be talking about, but they definitely do slow down this spike. This is something that I would maybe include if I'm working from home, or I can like find the time to really like plan these. It's kind of hard to like take these out to lunch with friends, but maybe eat, like have them before you leave the house. However, the bigger issue that I found with these was that I saw some advice saying, oh, take them before bed, especially like bitter melon. I took both of these before bed, and I would not recommend that. I woke up hypoglycemic. So my blood sugar dropped, and I got an alert on my phone saying, you need to eat right now because you're dangerously low. So if you're pairing these with a low-carb diet already, which is what I'm on, they can drop you a bit too far. So I'm going to just chuck them in the D category. Yes, they work, but I'd probably just use these if you're like going out, maybe eating some pasta or something, and you want to dull the impact. All right, moving on to C tier. So this is where we're going to get into the stuff that has a real impact. First up, I'm going to chuck calf raises in here. So this mimics walking. So what I was doing was I was sitting on the couch after lunch. I saw my glucose was starting to spike, so I stood up. I did some calf raises, maybe for about 5 minutes. It's really easy to do, and I even do this at work. I'll chuck my desk up into a standing desk so no one in the office is like, what the hell is she doing? And I'll just stand there behind my desk, kind of just going up and down, up and down, up and down, and it does help. It mimics walking, so if you can't get away from your desk or walk after you've eaten, this is a nice alternative. I can also kind of do it in the car if I've got my car on cruise control. So if I've had a big meal and then I got to run out and go somewhere, I can kind of do that in the car. And it does work. It's not as dramatic as walking or exercise, but I could definitely see the spike start to flatten a bit faster versus if I'd just sat there doing nothing. If you don't want people to look at you while you're doing it, maybe just in the bathroom. You could even be in the cubicle at work doing some squats and some calf raises just to use up some of that glucose with the largest muscles in your legs. So like I said before, mimics walking, which is why it's improving glucose regulation. But the reason why that helps is you've got a major muscle in your leg. And this muscle is called the soleus muscle. It consumes blood, glucose for energy without relying heavily on glycogen. This movement can reduce your post-meal glucose spikes and decrease insulin, making it a pretty highly efficient, fatigue-resistant way as well to manage metabolic health. It doesn't require hours, it's just 5 minutes. Calf raises are also a good way to get there if you can't walk. The second one that I'm chucking in this C tier range is veggies before meals. All right, vegetables before meals. So this is just getting a little plate of vegetables, hopefully soaked in some healthy fats. So you're eating a salad or some steamed broccoli before you are eating the protein or carbs on your plate. If you are out at a restaurant, you could be ordering an entree of vegetables before your main meals at a restaurant. So the science here is that the fiber in the vegetables plus the fat that you're going to drizzle all over them creates a nice barrier in your digestive system. And that barrier is going to slow down how quickly everything gets absorbed. So your glucose spike is gentler, more gradual, instead of just shooting straight up and then dropping back down again. Did I see a big difference with this one? Yeah, it was definitely noticeable. I tried this one out at a few restaurants and I also did it at home. It was like my glucose would still spike, but just not quite as high. It's more that it just stabilizes that curve. It's one of those things where it helps, and I'd probably use it if I was having like pasta or pizza at a restaurant. But if I'm ordering a steak or something with protein and fat, I'd just save my money on ordering an entree. I think both of these are solid little tools to just have in your back pocket. They're not absolute game changers. They're just easy enough to implement. So hence C tier. Now, B tier, I'm going to chuck meal order in here. So with meal order, this is where things start to get a bit interesting. These are strategies that work consistently and are pretty easy to do with most of the meals that you're eating. There's a little bit of planning and effort, but this one's pretty easy to do. This is just basically eating your vegetables and your protein without dipping into your carbs until the end of the meal. And what this is going to do is similar to how I was talking about the vegetables before meals, is this is just going to dull that spike and create that nice sort of fat and protein layer around your stomach so that when the carbs hit, they don't spike as hard. Your ideal food order here is going to be like your veggies first, then your protein with fats, and then carbs last. And when I tested this properly, like eating an entire salad and then my steak and then finally touching like the potato, it was drastic. I even went out and had steak at a restaurant. I ate about half of the portion of carbs. I basically had no spike whatsoever during this. And after the meal, I didn't feel bloated either. I didn't feel heavy leaving. I actually walked out of the restaurant feeling full but lean, which is great. And I was able to still enjoy about half of the serving of potatoes. The only reason why I didn't eat the whole serving was I was genuinely stuffed. And I try to eat intuitively, so when I feel myself feeling stuffed, I just stop. And this is just eating things in a different order versus just chucking everything on your fork and eating it all in one go. This means that your body can process everything almost in waves instead of getting hit with a rush of glucose all at once. And the fiber slows things down. The protein and the fats keep you steady with your energy. And by the time the carbs hit, your body's already working on digesting everything else. The only reason why this is not in like this A tier is because it's kind of annoying in real life. If you are at a restaurant with friends, I don't know how many people are going to sit there and eat the entire salad, then eat all of the steak, and then eat the portion of carbs. However, it doesn't need to be like you can't touch a potato until the very end of your meal. What I was doing was I was just eating little bits of almost like a palate cleanser with the chips, but I was making sure that I wasn't diving too much into the chips before I'd finished the rest of the stuff on my plate. That's also something that I do purely because I want to eat the most expensive part first. A bit of a cheap ass that way. So I know that when I buy a steak out, I'm paying for the steak. I want to eat the steak. I need to get my money's worth, and then I'll eat the chips after because those are the cheap part. Next up, I'm going to put apple cider vinegar. Let's see. I love this stuff. I had it earlier today. This absolutely works, and the data on my glucose monitor proves it. When I took 1 to 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar diluted in water about 15 minutes before my meal, I saw a noticeable impact. The spike from my meal was really blunted. It was not completely flat, but it was way better than without it. The problem is you have to remember to do this before every meal. I would chuck it up here if it was easier to do, but like, who's going to carry apple cider vinegar around with them? You're not going to take it to a restaurant or take it to work. You might be able to take it before you leave for a restaurant or before you leave for work in the morning or before you go to bed. That's when I would recommend using that. And if you're out with dinner with friends, I just don't see people pulling out like a little bottle of vinegar and drinking it straight on the table. So not always super practical. And I haven't left enough space for the next one, but that's berberine. This stuff is amazing. I take it once or twice a day. I really heavily used berberine when I was initially switching into more low carb keto type eating. I was taking this in the morning, and now it's really cool to actually see the baseline of my glucose stay more stable throughout the day when I do take it versus not taking it. It's like it's working in the background, and I find that the impact of this is not as like time sensitive as these guys, at least for me. Keep in mind, this is my body, my N of 1 experiment, but for berberine, I can just take it in the morning and it sort of acts like nature's Ozempic, and people actually call it nature's Ozempic because of how well it works with insulin sensitivity. It can help to control your hunger as well, and whenever I take berberine, I find that it almost like shuts off that food noise in my brain, which is honestly a game changer if you're trying to be in a deficit. But the catch with berberine is that it can upset your stomach, some people, especially on an empty stomach. It doesn't bother me very much unless I eat like 2 or more capsules on an empty stomach. There's also dihydroberberine, which is the stronger version of berberine, that a lot of people will rather take less of dihydroberberine because their body gets upset by taking larger amounts of berberine. So have a more potent but like less physical amount of the berberine, and there's a bit less of an impact on upsetting your stomach. So with this one, I do recommend just taking it with food to start and then see how you go on an empty stomach. Not medical advice. All of these 3 are so solid. They are tools that really work, but they do require a bit of consistency and planning. That's why they are in this B tier and not higher. I definitely recommend adding these into your diet. Okay, now we're getting into the big guns. I'm going to chuck like dressing your carbs in here. Okay, so dressing your carbs. This is a bit different to like veggies before and meal order. This is just never eating a carb by itself. This is if you really want to limit the amount of spike that you get. And I didn't make this up. I got this from Glucose Goddess. This one is one that I would normally do anyway, but it's really cool to see the data on my glucose monitor back it up. So once again, back to that example with the steak that I had out and there was barely any spike. That's because I didn't just go out and order pasta on its own without anything. I had the chips with the steak and the vegetables, and my glucose barely moved. It was almost flat. This is because the protein and the fat from the steak slowed down, again, how my body absorbed the carbs from the chips. I also tested this with mango. So I would have mango by itself, and then I would have mango with dollop cream. I love dollop cream. So I would chuck it in there and my spike was much less. So this is just different from these 2. It's simply adding some kind of fat or protein source in with your carbs to lessen the spike. I did the same thing with grapes. Funny enough, grapes, oh my God, those spiked my glucose more than anything else. It's not going to stop me from eating grapes, but it is good to know. And again, when I put the dollop cream with the grapes, it had a lot less of an impact. So dressing your carbs, if you're having baked potato, then have that with butter, or add it to a meal where you've got proteins and fats. And this is why in my coaching, I teach women to like build every meal around protein and fat first, and then add the carbs strategically. This is because your body is processing everything differently depending on what you eat it with. It's not just never eating carbs. It is about never eating them naked. Always make sure they have clothes on. No one likes being naked and alone. And if we can lessen the spike while including things like mango and grapes, then I'm happy. The only reason why this is in A tier and not S tier is because it still requires a little bit of planning. You have to actually have some protein and fat available. You can't always control your meal composition, especially when you're eating out or just grabbing something quick as a snack. But when you can do it, it is an absolute game changer to keep your glucose stable, staying fuller for longer and avoiding those awful energy crashes. And yes, I know adding some fats into your carbs is obviously going to increase the amount of calories per meal, but what I teach is not thinking about the calories and thinking more about the insulin spikes that everything causes. Because when I started doing that, I finally was able to lose the weight. And it's not just me. I've helped my mum reverse her prediabetes by doing the exact process. Okay, finally, we're up to the S tier. This is the cream of the crop. This stuff matters more than everything else combined. The foundation of everything else is built on this. And number one, I'm going to put walking or any kind of movement after you eat. All right, guys, this had the most immediate visible impact on my glucose monitor. Every single time I would eat something, I'd check my glucose, I'd go for a 10 to 15 minute walk, I'd check again. Well, I'll be damned. The spike was either completely blunted or came back down way faster than if I just sat on the couch. This is because your muscles act like glucose sponges, and when you move, your muscles pull glucose out of your bloodstream to use for energy. It is literally the most natural, effective way to control blood sugar. No pills, no supplement, no weird meal timing, just movement. The beautiful thing is you don't have to be intense. This can be a casual walk around your neighborhood, a few laps around your office, or even just tidying up your kitchen while listening to some music or this video. Movement is movement, and your glucose doesn't care if you're in workout gear or pajamas. This is why I recommend getting in some steps after your meals where possible. Even just 500 to 1,000 steps can make a huge difference. It's free, it's accessible, and it works better than any of these supplement hacks that I tested. Now, for the other S tier strategy, I'm going to put fasting in here. So fasting, when you're not eating, your insulin stays low. Your body switches into burning fat for fuel and your glucose levels stabilize. This is the ultimate glucose hack because you are removing the thing that spikes the glucose in the first place, which is food. And you don't even need to do longer fasts. You can just stop snacking in between meals. Eat 3 times a day. Let your body come back down to normal levels and then eat again. If you're eating the right foods in between, then you shouldn't be hungry between meals. Now, fasting isn't for everyone, and it needs to be done strategically, especially for women and our hormonal cycles. But when it's done correctly, it's one of the most powerful tools for improving insulin sensitivity and metabolic health. This is a huge part of why I do intermittent fasting as part of my lifestyle, and I teach it in my coaching. I also recommend not doing this every day, not the same window every day, but cycling between eating windows, keeping my body metabolically flexible. And here's the thing about these 2 S tier strategies. They are free. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need anything special, no special equipment. You just need to move and give your body a break from eating. And fasting will, in fact, even save you money. I use it like a hack when I'm on holidays. I'll drop down to 2 meals a day, no snacks, and have a much cheaper food budget when I'm out and, skiing or going to Canada or wherever. These are the foundation. Everything else in the lower tiers, they're just these supporting players, but walking and fasting, these are 2 that are absolute key. All right, so before we wrap up, I just want to get real for a second. I need you to understand something. Weight loss and metabolic health aren't a one-size-fits-all type of thing. Some of you might find the apple cider vinegar total game changer, and walks maybe don't do as much for you. Some of you might feel that you need different strategies, whether you're dealing with PCOS, perimenopause, thyroid issues, or just years of yo-yo dieting. I don't want you to just copy what I did, but I would love if you test these for yourself. And honestly, you might put these in a completely different order than I did. But the big takeaway here is that glucose and insulin control is the foundation to metabolic health. When you get this right, everything else becomes far easier. Fat loss becomes easier, energy becomes more stable, cravings calm down. The best part is the stuff that works best, the movement and the fasting, those are free and within your control. You don't need to buy expensive supplements. And actually, things like apple cider vinegar and berberine are pretty affordable as well. And things like meal order, dressing your carbs, vegetables before meals, carb raises, oh God, even cold showers, free for the most part, other than obviously buying food. But the order that you eat it in it's not going to make it cost more. So moral of the story, you don't need to buy expensive supplements or follow some complicated protocol. You just need to understand the basics and start implementing them. If you want to go deeper, if you want the full framework I use to lose over 14 kilos and keep it off, including exactly what to eat, when to fast, how to structure your workouts, and how to time your carbs around your menstrual cycle, I've linked my resources in the description. It's everything I wish I had years ago, all in the one place. And if you're looking for a New Year plan that actually works for weight loss, check out this video I did about how to lose so much weight in 2026 that people will think you're on Ozempic. And yes, I know that that's a clickbaity title, but I go into the details about how to mimic the GLP-1 agonist drugs in your body naturally. All right, that's it for today. And if this was helpful, give it a like and maybe just send it to someone dealing with the same struggles. And let me know in the comments, which of these hacks have you tried? What worked? Would you put these in a totally different order? See you guys in the next one. Take care of yourself.